Welcome to Your Mac Life for Wednesday, October... What's the day today? Today's the 12th. Wednesday, October 12th, the year 2016, show number 1111. I am your host, Shawn King. Yes, this is an unfamiliar voice because I haven't been here for the last 3 weeks. 2 weeks ago, we had a huge power outage here in this area of the lower mainland, an hour on either side of me, all the way out to Hope, British Columbia, down to Abbotsford, British Columbia. There was some kind of transmission failure and took out all the power for the entire area. 50,000 people lost power. And then last week, and you can still hear it, you'll hear me hack. My apologies if you hear me snuffle and mucus stuff. I'm going to try to avoid doing it in the microphone, but last week I just had that deathly cold. Just lie on the couch and want to die cold. Achy body and stuffy head and sore throat like I was swallowing razor blades. I couldn't even sit up last week, let alone talk long enough to do a show. So my apologies for missing 2 shows in a row. It's been a long time since I missed 2 in a row for stuff like that. On tonight's show, we're going to talk to our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. We're going to talk about Samsung and the implosion, pun intended, of their Galaxy Note 7 line and how that's going to affect the company and how it might or might not affect Apple and those folks who use iPhones. We'll talk to him about that. We'll also talk about whether or not Siri is actually dumb. Do you find Siri dumb? Do you read the Walt Mossberg column on Recode that Siri is dumb? I find her annoying at times, but I think I've always chalked up to my mumbling. I tend to mumble sometimes. And when I repeat myself to Siri, she gets things. But it's also very annoying that she can't do some things. Like set a countdown timer. Why not? Why does she tell me to go use the clock to do it? You do it. So sometimes she's a little dumb, I guess. What do you think? Do you use Siri a lot? I don't use it enough to know, to say definitively whether or not I think she's dumb. But let me know. Send emails to onair@yourmaclifeshow.com. And also in our starting point photography segment, we're going to talk about, does the new portrait mode on the iPhone 7 Plus make you a better photographer? We'll talk about that also in our starting point photography segment. Speaking of starting point photography, I have got some big news. None of you are going to care about, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's big news for me. I found out this morning sometime. It's 99.9% official that on April 20th, I will be leaving on a jet plane out of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and jetting off for 18 hours. Oh, my God, that's going to be horrible. 18 hours to Tokyo, Japan, where I will spend 3 days in beautiful Tokyo, Japan. And then their tour group is headed off to Hanoi, Vietnam, where we'll then do a cruise down to the Halong Bay. Then we're going to go to Hoi An and Hue in Vietnam, also Saigon, Vietnam, then off to Angkor Wat in Cambodia. It's going to be an amazing trip. You guys have hired me to take pictures for the tour company. It's going to be 18 days in Japan, Vietnam, and Cambodia. And then I'll fly back, and once I get back, the week after, hopefully I'm going to Portugal. I'm going to be a world traveler. Someone pointed out in the Telegram room, I will have traveled like 3/4 the way around the world. It's going to be just an incredible trip. It's going to be that month from April 20th to the middle of May, hopefully, when I come back from Portugal. It's going to be an amazing month for me. I'm very, very happy to go. It's going to be interesting, too, because it's not an area of the world I've really had a lot of interest in. I know it's beautiful. I know the people are wonderful. I know the food is weird and freaky and fun. The culture is amazing. Angkor Wat is an incredible place photographically. It's one of those places that every serious photographer wants to go and shoot. So it's one of those things I definitely have always thought about. But unless you get all the money in the world, you prioritize where you want to go. And for me, I'm a much more of a European guy. European history, European culture. Huge love of Italy. I love France and England and those kind of places. So Southeast Asia has never been a priority for me. So to have someone take me there makes a big difference. Is going to be an opportunity of a lifetime because I'm probably never going to go back. So I'm really looking forward to doing this trip. So I can't wait to go. April 20th, I will be away. Well, obviously, for that period of time, too, we won't be doing a show either because I won't be able to do Your Mac Life show. I'll definitely be doing a lot of stuff. I'll use the opportunity to do more video and audio things that I can post on the website, but there won't be any shows during that period of time. Dave D says, hey, Siri, set a timer for 5 minutes. Works great. Yes, but ask her to set like a stopwatch timer. You want to know from now to 2 minutes. Count up. Siri will count down from 4 minutes. Set a timer for an hour. But you can't get Siri to count up. So, like lap times, that kind of stuff. Those kind of things that Monty says, more weird food than fun? Well, it depends on your point of view. I think it's both weird and fun. I think they're both equally. I remember being in Japan and having our host order for us and having this black spaghetti and just thinking to myself, that looks weird, but I'm going to try it anyway. It turned out it was octopus ink spaghetti. It was delicious. Delicious. Mosquito says, I love Vietnamese food. I'm not very familiar with Vietnamese food. Traditional Vietnamese food. It's like I've had the Vietnamese food here in Vancouver, but I don't know much about traditional Vietnamese food. I'm looking forward to the photography. I've seen a lot of, like, I always tell folks, when you go on a trip, go to Flickr and do a search for the area you're going to be in and look at what other photographers have. Even if you're not a photographer, look at the pictures that other folks have taken to get a sort of a sense of the area, the people. Same with Instagram, that kind of stuff. Just do a search for those places. And so I've been doing a lot of Flickr searching for those the cities we'll be in Thailand and Vietnam, especially, sorry, not Thailand. I keep saying Thailand. Cambodia and Vietnam, especially Angkor Wat, because Angkor Wat is a spectacularly beautiful place that I'm really looking forward to going to see. Wayne says, try the horse flesh ice cream. Okay. Scott Thrift says, make sure you have all your shots before you go. Now, they don't recommend your shots. There's no required shots to go to those countries. But, yeah, they say you should get your usual tetanus, Hep B, or for hepatitis shots, wherever they might be. So, sorry, still going to be able to, still going to cough, still going to hack every now and then. My apologies. Yeah, it's been a while since we've been away. One thing I want to say is during the live version of the show, I could not be happier for our IRC babe Sly. For those of you who follow her on Facebook or on Twitter, you'll know that a couple weeks ago she went down to Seattle with some of her Bruce friends, and they got to meet Bruce Springsteen. She got to actually not only shake hands with Bruce Springsteen, not only take a picture with Bruce Springsteen, but Bruce Springsteen kissed Sly on the cheek. That's got to be incredible. That is fantastic. Sly, post in the IRC chat room your link to your article on WordPress. If you follow Sly on Facebook, ask her for it on Facebook if you didn't see it already. Great article. Sly's a really good writer. I wish she would write more. I've always told her that she writes really, really well, very conversationally, very entertainingly. But it was really neat knowing she was going down there and following her adventure as her and her friends went down there, and then reading her post about the process. Apparently the company that put the book signing on did a great job, according to Sly, in organizing it and making sure that it went smoothly and letting you know. Wasn't there a what did she call it? I think she called it a spruce up room? Spruce Bruce? I'll grab Sly's article and see what she called it. They had signs along the way. Oh, that's right. It was hilarious. As you were in line, they actually had a mirror on the wall just before you get in to see Bruce Springsteen so you could spruce up. So you could do your hair and do your face and do your makeup. That is hilarious. That is just brilliant that they did that. I think that's just wonderful. Spruce Bruce was what they called it. That's just screamingly funny. Spruce for Bruce mirror, she called it. Sly says, I didn't kiss him. He gave me a peck when I went in for a hug. That's fantastic. Oh, good for you, Sly. Very, very happy to see that. Great article, too. And I love the ending line where she says that people say that you shouldn't meet your heroes, but in this case, they are wrong because she had a wonderful time meeting her heroes. So that's fantastic, Sly. Really good to hear. As always, send us emails to onair@yourmaclifeshow.com. If you would like to comment on anything, hey, if you've been to Hanoi, if you've been to Vietnam, Cambodia, Angkor Wat, send me emails. Let me know what your experiences were. Anything that you want to make sure I see or do or eat or experience or things to avoid. I'm always happy to hear things, but things that I should avoid. Trips in April. So you got plenty of time, but if you've been to those areas of the world, let me know. Let me know what you think of the area, what you experienced, what you liked, what you didn't like. Always willing to take advice from other folks about what goes on there. Emails to onair@yourmaclifeshow.com. And it happened because I did this. If you know of anyone else who does these kinds of trips, who wants to do a trip with a professional photographer and teach them how to shoot these beautiful locations, get in touch with me. Have them get in touch with me. Because that's what happened with this thing. I was talking about the Finisterre tour, and this other company heard about it and said, hey, would you like to do it with us? I was like, yeah, of course I would. And fantastic of the folks at Finisterre Tours, because the dates of the Southeast Asia trip overlap the Portugal trip. And I was going to leave the Southeast Asia trip early to get to the Portugal trip. I was basically going to fly out of Cambodia to Portugal. But then I noticed that the Angkor Wat segment of the trip was at the end of the Asia trip, and you can't miss Angkor Wat. If you're going to go there, if there's no other place you go, you've got to go see Angkor Wat as a photographer. And so I thought, oh, crap, I'm not going to be able to make the Portugal trip. So I sent an email to the lovely folks at Finisterre Travel, and they said, yeah, they had no problem with them pushing the Portugal trip forward a week. So fantastic that they'll be able to do that for me, and I really appreciate Finisterre Travel for accommodating this trip that way for me. So I thank them very, very much for that. Later on in the show, we're talking about, does the iPhone 7's portrait mode make you a better photographer? We'll talk about that, and we'll talk to our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. This is Your Mac Life. Welcome back, folks. Thank you guys very much for joining me. I am Shawn King, joined in our phone room by our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. Jim, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
I am good. As I was asking Jim on the phone earlier, it's very important to note that we don't care about the football season. We don't care about the baseball playoffs. Hockey started tonight.
Hockey,
baby. That's all that matters. And the good games.
That's all we care about.
The good games start tomorrow. Were you caught up in any of that Giants fever, Cubs Giants thing over last night, yesterday? Do you care?
No, I don't really care much about baseball overall. I like the Red Sox, of course, because they're Boston.
Yeah.
But it was pretty amazing to me because I was watching a TV show. And it was the bottom of the eighth, and the Giants were up 5-2.
Yep.
So I thought, okay, well, there you go. And then I watched another game or another show, and then I turned that off. And when it was over, and everybody was screaming,
yep.
and the Cubs were jumping up and down in the middle of the field, and I thought, wow, what good losers, you know? I mean, that's great. And then, you know, obviously they didn't lose after all.
That's right. So. They didn't. It's going to be interesting to see if how much further the Cubs can go. It's very funny. I've got a lot of friends who are Cubs fans, and watching them stress out over this is very similar to watching Boston fans in 2014. It's not 2014, 2004 stress out because they know they're going to lose. It's just a matter of when it's going to lose and how much it's going to hurt. You know,
well,
because they're so used to losing.
That's a Boston fan every day.
That's right, exactly.
You know, I mean, I absolutely loved my Bruins, but holy shit, I cried myself to sleep watching the Bruins.
That's right, because it's just a matter of time before they collapse. You just know it is.
Well, yeah, even and this isn't like they're going to collapse this year. They're going to collapse this period.
That's right.
You know, every single minute that they play, that they're on the ice, that the team is actually active, is just miserable for a Bruins fan.
You can't enjoy the game when you feel that way.
Well, and what makes it worse is that I've been a Bruins fan for probably like 40 years or more than that, maybe 45 years. Yep. My father's been a Canadiens fan even longer.
Geez.
So preseason play, the Canadiens beat the Bruins. My father, who never texts at all, starts texting me. I didn't even know who the number was from until I saw the text. And he was screaming about the Canadiens beating the Bruins.
In a preseason game.
At a preseason game when all they have out there are, you know, kids that are trying to make the team.
Yeah, that's right.
And nobody cares about the score in a preseason game. Except him when the Canadiens beat the Bruins. So there's my life right there.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Well, at least your life's not as bad as Samsung's life. Samsung Note 7 is officially dead. Do you think, from what we've been reading about over the last week, 2 weeks, did Samsung handle this well, or is this a issue of their own making?
Well, first off, I do not think that they handled it well.
No.
I really don't. I think, and who was it? I think it was Gruber that I was talking to on his podcast a couple weeks ago and said the best product recall of all time was Tylenol.
Yes, yeah.
Because when there was, what was it, arsenic or something that somebody put in a few bottles of Tylenol?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
But everybody was scared to buy Tylenol. So what did they do? They recalled everything.
Yeah.
Everything that had the Tylenol name on it, they recalled and got out of the stores and restocked. It cost them dearly in finances. But people bought Tylenol again because of it.
Yeah.
And the company outlasted the whole thing.
Sure.
Now, Samsung tried to pick and choose what they were going to recall and say, oh no, everything else is fine. Everything's fine. We've got replacements. It's all good. Everything is fine. And Well, clearly it wasn't, because the replacements were catching on
Yeah.
fire. So the fact that they had to kill the product. Now, make no mistake, they're going to come out with another product that is exactly like the Note 7,
Yeah.
just with a different name.
Sure.
And it may catch on fire too. I don't know.
Do you cut Samsung a little bit of slack because they said that they couldn't recreate the issues in their in-house testing?
I give them no slack.
Yeah.
I would give no company no slack in this, because it happens over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, the conditions are not the same. People on airplanes, people using it, people not using it,
Yeah.
Where it's sitting in luggage where, you wouldn't expect anything to happen. It's sitting in somebody's car, and it catches fire and catches the car on fire. I mean, come on. It's a hazard. I want x-rays of everybody on the plane if I ever fly again, to make sure that they don't have a Galaxy Note 7.
There was an idiot on Mashables who said that he's not turning in his Galaxy Note 7 because he said the odds are against it.
Is he a writer or something?
Yep. That's supposedly, millions of these things have been sold, and even if 1,000 of them have exploded, the odds are still in his favor. So therefore, he's not giving up his Galaxy Note 7.
Well, he's a moron.
I agree. He's a complete, because what he's doing is he's taking a chance not just with his phone, but our lives. If he's on that plane with me, he's not just risking his life, he's risking the life of everybody on the goddamn plane.
Yep.
That's just utterly irresponsible for him. And I think I heard, I hope it's not a rumor, but I think I heard a rumor that there will be a forced update to the Galaxy Note 7s where Samsung is going to force those to not be able to be charged ever again. You know what I mean? They're going to do something to the software so that the battery can't be charged, and therefore,
well, that would be good.
And therefore, once it dies, it then becomes a brick.
That's good. Why would you hope that didn't happen?
No, I'm hoping it's true. It's just a rumor now, but I'm hoping it's a true rumor that it's actually something that happens.
As long as it's a forced update.
Yeah, one of those over-the-air updates that happens automatically. I guess Android can do that. I don't know if Apple can do that, force you to upgrade something, but I heard that was something that was going to be happening. But it's just, I think bragging about it too is 10 times more irresponsible. Having it on you and just keeping it safe is one thing, but writing a story on Mashable.com with your picture saying, hey, this is the kind of asshole I am. I'm willing to risk your life just to keep this stupid goddamn phone.
Yep.
That guy hopefully will get bitch slapped at some point.
Well, Audible or Mashable should take care of that. I would hope.
The recall is in effect. The Samsung is pulling back all of them. They're no longer being sold. They're no longer being service. Does this help Apple, do you think?
Oh, I think it does help Apple. And I keep coming back to this. I think it's important to remember consumers only know what they hear on the evening news.
Yes.
Because the rest of it is not important to them.
Yeah.
They don't care. They're not following it like you and I and everybody listening. They don't care.
Yeah.
So for an average consumer, if they sit around and talk tech, they sit around and say, oh, yeah, did you hear that Samsung stuff? Yeah, it catches on fire. So that's what they're going to think. And then when they go to the store, they say, no, I don't want one of those.
Yeah.
And now, price is going to play a part in this and stuff like that. But I think it does help Apple. It certainly helps Apple stock because Samsung is taking a beating right now.
Yeah.
And, they'll take a beating because they can't sell the Note 7. And they'll take a beating because they're scumbags. And, they're going to hell.
I think it helps Apple, but I don't think it's going to help Apple from the point of view of sales. I think those folks who are going to buy a Samsung are going to buy an Android phone. They like the Android operating system. I can't see a great percentage of people, not even a minority of people, a very small number of people will go, all right, screw it, I'm not going to buy a Samsung Galaxy version I'm not going to buy a Samsung anything, but I'm also not going to buy an Android anything. I'm going to switch to the iPhone. Do you think that most people by now are kind of locked into the Android versus iPhone because of the software they bought, or because of inertia, or because I know how to run the iPhone software, I know how to run the Android software? Do you think that will prevent people from switching over to the iPhone?
I don't think stuff like that will prevent people. I just I think it's people have made up their mind, and I think most of the people that have made up their mind to buy an Android phone would come down a lot to price.
Yep.
And they can get. You see deals all the time on Android phones.
Yep.
Like buy one get 20 free. So Apple doesn't want to get into that game, and they shouldn't.
That's right. I agree.
So
MacMan in the IRC chat room says, I'm really glad Apple is keeping quiet on this. Dave D says, what's scary is that this could probably happen to any manufacturer. Do you agree with that?
Well, what I find interesting about this whole thing, I mean, shit can happen to any company.
Yeah.
But the fact that they tried to fix it and couldn't, and then canceled the entire product, that, there's some stuff going on in there that I just don't get. So either they wanted to get rid of the brand, the Note brand, because it was so damaged, or they've designed something that had such a flaw that there's no way that they'd be able to fix it.
Scott Thrift in the IRC chat room said their big push was the Note 7 worked underwater. Apparently the only place it worked safely was underwater.
Hey, yeah, there you go. There you go.
I think a big difference here, too, is that if this had happened to Apple, this would destroy the iPhone line. I don't think this will destroy Samsung's handset sales overall permanently.
No.
But if this had happened to Apple, because it would have been just iPhone, not Galaxy Note 7, blah, 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 blah. You understand what I'm saying? I get it. I think this would be a lot more damaging to Apple if it had happened to them.
Yeah, and, there's no way to tell how much this is going to damage Samsung in the long run.
Yeah.
Our Galaxy phone sales going down because people are now afraid to buy those? I don't think so.
No.
I mean, again, people will look at the brand itself, the product itself, and say, this isn't a Note? Okay, those were catching on fire. I don't want one of those.
Yeah.
No, this is a different product. And I think that's important to remember, that we look at this differently. I mean, I wouldn't buy a Samsung product at all.
Yeah.
Their washing machines catch on fire. Their TVs turn the camera on and spy on you. I mean, it's just a miserable company.
Yeah, they got a lot of problems. MacMan says, while Apple brass may be laughing their asses off in the executive washrooms, they told their engineers to quadruple check their iPhones. Oh, yeah. Every manufacturer has gone back to their engineers and going, make sure this doesn't happen to us.
Well, but I think that's part of the difference. I think Apple does that to begin with.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that quality control at Apple is very high on their hardware.
Yes.
So I think that they're checking a lot of this stuff long before it ever gets to the customer. And the turnaround time for the replacements for the Note 7 would indicate that they didn't do that.
Yeah.
And how is it that these phones are catching on fire spontaneously, but not a single one from Samsung did?
What do you mean from Samsung did?
From Samsung didn't. They can't recreate it.
Yes, yeah.
But if they can't recreate it, how did they come up with a fix for it?
Good point.
Which apparently they didn't come up with a fix for it. Yeah. But how could they safely send out phones and say, okay, these ones are fixed, if they couldn't recreate the problem and had no idea what it was?
Well, it sounds like the issue isn't the battery per se; it's the connector to the battery. And if they just change the connector to the battery, or made sure there wasn't as much juice going through that connector, that might be the solution.
How did that work out?
No, apparently not well the first time. Oh, well. Moving on, it's Samsung's fault. I don't think it's. I think there is a good opportunity there from Apple, and Apple has said in the last 3 quarterly conference calls, they've bragged about how many Android users are switching from Android to the iPhone. It's not as hard a switch to make as it is from Windows to the Macintosh OS, but it's still a little bit of a pain point for people. I think the big advantage is, and this is kind of funny, that we've seen many surveys that Android users just don't buy as much software for their phone as iPhone users do. So there's not as much of a lock-in on the Android side. I probably got $1,000 worth of software that I bought for my iPhone on my iPhone. That would be a big pain point to try to recreate that on the Android side. But if you never bought anything up for your phone and Android, maybe that's not that big of a deal to switch to the iPhone.
Well, and that could be. I mean, and there are a lot of free apps on the iPhone as well. Yep. Just like there is an Android. There's a lot of free apps there. So most of what you average people need to do, you can do just fine.
Yeah, for free
with free apps.
Yeah, that's true. Moving on. Interesting article on Recode. Mossberg on Siri being dumb. You had a neat little comment. There are many times I disagree with Walt on his tech opinions, but I've had my own issues with Siri not being able to give me answers to seemingly easy questions. I think that's the biggest frustration I have with Siri is that she doesn't seem to get the easy stuff right.
Yeah.
And that's really annoying when you just say something like, what time is this thing going to happen? She goes, well, I don't know what you're talking about. But people have shown, and Walt Mossberg has tweeted over the last week or so as he's been getting this column ready, shown that Google gets those questions right almost every single time.
Yeah, and it is frustrating. And, I think Walt had a comment in his story that Apple said, well, that's not what they're focused on. They wanted to be able to help you do things. But the only thing that I really use Siri for now is to set a timer.
Yep.
And when I'm getting ready to burn food, I set a timer to make sure that I do properly burn it.
Sure, yeah.
And then I play music. And I do that most of the time now. I do it from my watch. I don't even use the phone for that. So I just, when I want to look up sports scores and Siri gives me answers from like 1990.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
No, Siri, I actually want to know about tonight's game. And there was a situation. I think it was maybe the playoffs, the NBA playoffs or the hockey playoffs. Yeah, it was hockey playoffs, San Jose Sharks, where they were playing a game that night. And I asked Siri what time the game was.
Yep.
And she said there wasn't a game.
That's right.
And I thought, okay, well, no game. I thought there was a game. Yeah. So I looked it up on Google. Sure enough, there was a game. And Siri had no idea.
Yep.
So, Apple touts the ability of Siri to have, it knows scores and it knows all this stuff. Well, okay, I'll use that because I enjoy sports.
Yep.
But when it doesn't even know that the game is on, well, that's a bit frustrating for me. And maybe other people don't care about that. Maybe, they want Siri to call somebody, or maybe they want Siri to add a note. And to be perfectly honest, to add an appointment or a reminder through Siri takes longer than it does for me to just type it in. So I just type it in. Really? I mean, you say, Siri, add a reminder. Okay, a reminder for what? Well, to do this. What time would you like it? Where would you like it? I mean, I can just type it in and be done with it.
Well, to be fair, though, if you give that information to Siri as you're doing the reminder, I do that all the time when I'm cooking. Siri, hey Siri, set a remind me to preheat my oven at 5:15. She did that perfectly for me today. I had no problem doing that. As long as you give her all the information, I think she works. But as someone says in the IRC chat room, and this might be part of the problem, Scott Thrift says, it's all in the phrasing. I use Siri for exchange rates, and if you don't get the wording right, it has a mental breakdown. That's part of the problem.
Well, and maybe it's my phrasing, because I started off giving Siri all the information that I needed, and then it would come up and still ask me, what do you want the appointment about?
Yeah.
Well, come on, Siri.
Yeah, I think part of it is that we haven't been trained to use Siri properly, but Siri hasn't been trained to hear us properly too. I think it might be a combination of both.
I think Siri overall, I mean, my main problem with Siri right now on the phone is that when I press and activate Siri, I start talking and it immediately comes up and says, I didn't get that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if you listen instead of interrupting me, you would get it. So that's my main problem right now. So I just stopped.
Yeah.
I really did. I set a timer on my watch to burn food and then play music.
Yeah.
And usually I do the play music thing when I'm in the car. I'll be driving along and listening to the hard rock radio or something and decide I want to hear, you hear a song and say, oh, I want to hear that band.
Yeah.
So I'll just go to Siri on my watch and say, play Metallica Shuffle. And it'll go off and pick some Metallica songs and play those until I stop it. So that's great. But that's about the extent of my use of Siri.
Yeah, I think part of it is how you use Siri, and as Scott said, the way you phrase things to Siri. I think for a lot of people is they'll try it for a few times, and it doesn't work out the way they expect it to. They stop using it entirely.
And Walt brought up that point, and I think that's a very, very good point.
Yeah. Or you force yourself to say things the way Siri wants to, and therefore it becomes useful for you, and so you use it a whole lot more often. I don't think there's anyone who uses Siri just a little bit. You either use it a lot or you use it very, very little. You know what I mean? I don't think there's a middle ground there.
I've seen people use Siri for text messages a lot.
Yep.
I know people that use it a lot, like the dictate button.
Yep.
So you go into messages, and if I was going to send you something, you dictate, and Siri does pretty good in dictation.
Yeah, I've never used it. Never bothered.
Yeah. I usually don't bother either, but I see people that do. And, I don't know. Maybe. Now, what's interesting is that I'm going to have to ask them, but I don't think that they use Siri for anything else.
Yeah.
But they use it for that. I don't use it for that, but I use it to, set a timer or whatever. So I don't know. I really like the idea of Siri, but I've just stopped using it as much.
Yeah, exactly.
And Apple puts out, like, they had that big interview a while ago about machine learning and all that kind of stuff. That's all well and good, but if it doesn't work now, then why would I bother later?
It's going to be really hard to get people who have given up on Siri to try it again at some point in the future. Yeah, absolutely.
When you tell people, okay, it's just like Apple Music. Yeah. When you tell people, okay, well, we did screw it up, but try it again.
Yeah.
All good now. All good.
That's right. Exactly. It's the problem they had with the Newton back in the day. The first version of the Newton sucked, and they made it better after the third or fourth iteration. But by that time, people were like, "Yeah, forget it. We're not trying it anymore. We're not following you down that path."
The Newton never sucked.
It sucked often. One of the issues, though, that folks are going to have with this stuff in general is, especially if they find that some other service does it better, like Walt Mossberg was saying, that Google. Ask Google does a much, much better job, much, much more consistently. Now, I've never used the Ask Google service. I don't bother. But according to Walt Mossberg, it works very, very well in the ways that you expect it to. And Apple could be losing that particular voice UI, voice personal assistant ground to Google, which would be a big deal for Apple.
Well, I did sort of head-to-head things whenever Siri I was particularly pissed off at one point. Maybe it was on that hockey game where, I asked Siri and Siri had no idea what hockey even was. And so then I asked Google and it knew right away.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I do this and I get frustrated, I'll ask Google the same question, voice command, and and it gets it. So that's troublesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be interesting to see how Apple gets us back into using Siri. You had a story over the weekend. You posted on Monday. Apple responds to the Dash controversy with proof. I saw this story pop up on Twitter over the weekend. I didn't pay much attention to it because the software wasn't anything that I actually used or had any interest in. What made you delve into this story?
Well, it seemed odd that Apple would completely delete a developer account with no warning, just boom, done,
Yep.
you're out.
Yep.
And that just doesn't seem like Apple because, whether we like some of the things that they do on the App Store or not, since Schiller has taken over the App Store, in that, the past year,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we've seen some tremendous changes to the App Store. He cares.
Yeah.
So, and then to have this happen, you just have to think, wow, that's odd. So, when you get the answer from Apple about what happened, you think, oof, God, that's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, it really is.
So, I guess that's the story behind the story. But
I think what I think what I found interesting about this was it seems like the measured response from the developer community. Usually, when this stuff happens, everyone loses their shit for 24 hours, calling Apple every name in the book. But it seemed like other developers were like, okay, this is the kind of thing we want Apple to do. We want them to police this kind of stuff. And then as more details came out slowly over the weekend, and then your statement that you got from Apple really sort of clarified things. And then the developer himself jumped in and said that it was a mix-up, a misunderstanding, it was a relative who was doing the stuff.
Yeah, that seems odd, too.
It does seem odd, but one of the things that I really pointed out to me was, I think it was Brett Simons of InEssentials pointed out the fact that the Dash app is very, very well done. It's got a good UI. It's got a good usability, whereas the other apps were awful. They were obviously hack apps. They were obviously not very well done apps. And Brent said that it was obvious that there were two completely different developers had created these apps, even though the same name was associated with them. Now, do you think Apple should reinstate the original developer, cut off the second account, and let Dash come back on the Apple Store?
Look, I don't think that there's any doubt that Dash is a great app.
Yep.
And it helps out developers. And, the thing is that Apple did try and work with this guy to get to the bottom of it.
Yep.
And I don't know if Apple didn't give him enough information or if he knew and just didn't want to admit it or what. But at some point, I'm sure that this will all get resolved. But we expect Apple to take a stand at some point. This is not new. They've been dealing with this for 2 years. This didn't happen last week and all of a sudden the account is gone.
Yeah, that's right.
This is 2 years. So, I think sometime over the last 2 years, somebody could have sent some. I mean, if I were him, I'd be hunting down that relative and putting an awful beating on them.
But doesn't it bring up the issue that if Apple's been doing this for 2 years, why couldn't they have solved it a year and a half ago, 18 months ago? Why did it take them so long?
They tried.
No, but I mean, cut this guy off a lot longer.
Because I mean, Apple is about helping the developer. They don't want to just cut off a developer, So they're trying to work with them and trying to get all this stuff done, and then. I hope that, this can be worked out satisfactorily
Sure.
so for the developer and for Apple, so that this kind of stuff doesn't happen. But ultimately, we want Apple to stop these fake reviews.
Yeah.
There are companies built on making fake reviews.
Absolutely.
We want that shit to stop, because when I go buy an app, I do take a look at the reviews, and if the reviews are horrible, or I did look at the review. I haven't really looked at any reviews in a long time, because they just mostly suck. You can't tell if it's real or not, or anything else. So, well, and that's what we talked about before, because we'll get an app based on what friends say.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting you say that, because Scott Thrift says that in the IRC chat room. He says Apple needs to keep on top of fake reviews. I rely on reviews to select apps. Do you think he's in the minority or the majority?
No, I think he's probably in the majority. Really? Because, again, you go in, you look at an app, and you see all these positive things being said, and you say, yeah, okay, I'll get that. But I wonder how many people, now that, this stuff has come out, will look at reviews a bit differently and say, is this real or is this fake?
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't read reviews at all for any of the apps that I download. I'll read, on the App Store reviews. I'll read reviews of reviewers on websites, but I don't read any of the reviews on the App Store, because I know how easily those can be gamed. I know how easily those can be fake, so I don't bother reading those at all. So it's interesting to see that Scott says that he does rely on those reviews for looking at apps and buying decisions on apps.
Cool. Yep, you never know.
Folks, I've been talking to Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. He's here each and every week. He has his own podcast up on the iTunes store. Just do a search for Jim Dalrymple on iTunes in the podcast section, and you'll find him talking about all kinds of other stuff, too. He's also on everyone else's frickin' podcast, too, so he's everywhere. Then, Jim, thanks for joining me, buddy.
Thanks a lot, Shawn.
All right, see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Jim's on like a dozen podcasts a week. He's everywhere. He was on Twit a few weeks ago. He was on Gruber's podcast. He's on everyone's podcast, so go over there. Check him out. Jim Dalrymple on the iTunes store. What do I got here? Oh, well, yes. In our starting point photography segment, there was a really interesting article on one of the photography websites that I saw over the last couple of weeks, and I was off sick for a while there. But one of the things I thought was really interesting was the comment that the person said photography isn't about cameras or sensors or gear, it's about light. And I disagree with that from the point of view of a photograph is a representation of light, but you need gear to see that representation. That the gear matters. The better gear you have, all things being equal, in theory, the better photograph you're going to get. So you can't just dismiss gear and say that light makes a photograph. Light creates a photograph. Light creates the image that you see with your eyes. But the camera that you use to capture that light makes a difference. And that follows along with the thing I wanted to talk about on tonight's Starting Point Photography segment, an article called, let me just pull this up for you guys, Can the New Portrait Mode on the iPhone 7 Plus Make You a Better Photographer? And so this guy has this article up on petalpixel.com is the website, and I'll post a link to it in the IRC chat room so you guys can read along with me if you'd like. And so the first thought that you would have, can the new portrait mode on iPhone 7 Plus make you a better photographer? Yes or no? What do you think your first inclination in that statement is? I'll wait for you folks in the IRC chat room to chime in with your thoughts and your comments on it. MacMan says maybe. Kimbo says no. Monty says, I think that depends on how good or bad of a photographer you currently are. Can it help someone like Jim? Perhaps. Can it help Shawn? Not likely. Scott Thrift says sometimes, depends on the person. Mosquito says nothing can make me a better photographer. Well, if you go through this article, and this article is kind of weird from that point of view because it's on a professional photography website, and yet the photographs he posts aren't really all that good. So here's an example. This is a picture of a kid, and he has these neat little sliders that you can scroll back and forth and see the difference. And for a lot of folks, you may not be able to see the difference in these two shots. If you look a little closely, you'll see in the background the image of the bird, the photograph back there, gets blurry. The subject matter, the pretty girl in the front, stays in focus, but in the background, the image gets blurry. The painting on the wall gets blurry. I'm sorry, but this is a shitty photograph. This is just not a well done, well composed, interesting photo. I think it can't prove his point because it's not a good picture, as people in the IRC chat room saying. Dave D, background's crappy. It's a horrible picture of the girl. Composition is not all that great. So I keep reading the article, and I scroll down some more, and now he's got another picture of one of his, I'm assuming one of his kids, making a peanut butter and jam sandwich. Same thing. You take the little slider and scroll back and forth, and you see the background gets a little blurry. But, dude, you're not making your point with shitty photographs. There's nothing interesting or compelling about this photo that makes me think that one of these images is better than the other. They're both bad photos. Portrait mode or not, they're both boring. Now the photo may mean something to him. This may be a cute moment with him and his kid. His kid's making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Good for him. But in an article that purports to talk about does portrait mode make you a better photographer, as Monty says, he's not supporting his position with the pictures he uses. This is the only photo that even slightly kind of makes the point. Here's the shot with, I think it's the same model, the same girl, again, I'll assume it's his daughter, next to a brick wall. And there's some interesting lines leading away from her that are kind of nice. And when you scroll back and forth, you see the blur, and it gets blurrier the further away the wall is. But it's still not a good photo. This is not a photo I would post. If I was going to post a photo, I would post just a crop of her face because she's a lovely young lady. But the photo itself is boring as shit. Again, he doesn't make his point with his own photographs. Another shot of a kid. And same thing. Yay, the background's blurry. So he seems to be trying to make the point that a blurry background in and of itself makes the photo good or bad. But that's not true. It doesn't matter whether the background is blurry or not. What matters is the composition, the subject matter, the tone, the color, the emotion that you get from the image that makes it a good photograph. And that doesn't matter whether you're using portrait mode or a Samsung phone or a DSLR or a point and shoot. It doesn't matter. That's why I teach a class called Learn to Take Better Photographs with any camera you have. Because you can take good photographs no matter what kind of camera you have if you know what you're doing. And conversely, you can take shitty photographs with the best camera in the world if you don't know what you're doing. So, Mosquito says maybe he deliberately posted shitty pictures to prove his point. I don't think he proves his point, though, with the shitty photos. His point is that portrait mode can help make you be a better photographer. No, it can't, is what I'm saying. Don't turn on portrait mode with the expectation that, oh, I suddenly have this magic button on my phone that makes my photographs better. That's not true. That's not going to happen. Portrait mode does one thing. It makes your background blurry. But if your image is a bad image to begin with, it doesn't matter whether the background is blurry or not. It's still going to be a bad image. It's going to be a bad image with a blurry background. If your foreground subject matter isn't interesting, compelling, in whichever way you define that, then it doesn't matter whether the background's in focus or out of focus. You've got to compose your shots well to begin with before you worry about portrait mode or the background or those kinds of things. Most of the photos that this guy has shot have got awful backgrounds. Doesn't matter whether they're blurry or not. The backgrounds are bad. He took the photos in the wrong way. And these are perfectly acceptable photos for Dad. But if you're a professional photographer, and I don't know if this guy is, maybe I'm not cutting him enough slack. What is this? Yeah, Simon Ellingworth is an educator and owner of UK-based Trade Secrets who's delivering trade secrets from the world's greatest photographers and digital artists in person, live, or demand. Well, his artist bio makes him sound like he knows what the hell he's talking about, but his article doesn't. Scott Thrift says, maybe it would be an interesting tool for a photo that has a really compelling foreground image, but a background you can't get away from. MacMan says they're nice snapshots, but shitty photos, if that makes sense. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. That's a really good way of describing those photos. They are nice snapshots of your family. They have no interest to anybody else. They're not compelling to anybody else. They're your kids in a particular moment in their lives, and for you, that means they're great. And I have no problem with that whatsoever. But I wouldn't use these photos to prove or disprove the point of whether portrait mode will make you a better photographer or not. And I'm telling you, though, it won't. I don't want people to go out and buy an iPhone 7, an iPhone 7 Plus, turn on portrait mode and go, yes, my photos will get better. No, they won't. If you're taking bad photos before the iPhone 7, you're going to take bad photos after the iPhone 7. You'll just take bad photos with a blurry background. That's all you're going to do. What you've got to do is, as I always say, learn, focus, practice. Learn how to create good images. Learn how to create compelling images. Take a class with me, with somebody else. Do searches on YouTube. Read a book. Go to your local library and dig up some photography books. Very, very few people. I've been teaching photography for 10 years now. And very, very few people have a natural eye for composition. I'm going to pull a number to my butt and say I've probably taught 5,000 people, and maybe 5 of them have a natural eye for composition who nail it every single time as opposed to just getting lucky, that know composition naturally. You've got to learn it. You've got to practice it. You've got to work at it. But turning on some mode on your camera is not going to automatically fix that with you or fix that for you. Dave D says, oh, geez, my portfolio is littered with crappy photos. Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's is. MacMan, I have a few hundred of my nephew, but 99% of them will never be seen by anyone outside the family. That's great. That's fine. Those are lovely family photos. That's where they should stay, is with the family. Scott Thrift says, if you take average photos, you take average photos. No amount of filters or trickery will fix that. I don't necessarily agree with that, Scott, because I've taken some average bad photos that I can fix with filters, with Lightroom, with editing. But it's also knowledge, too. I know I can fix this photo. I know I've composed this photo well. The light was wrong, or the colors are wrong, or I can fix it in post, kind of thing. But I understand what you're saying. If it's an average photo, in general, most people can't fix an average photo. Kimbo says you can salvage, but it won't make it great. Yeah, that's right. As always, if you have any questions about photography, I'm always happy to answer anything you guys have. Send emails to onair@yourmaclifeshow.com or send them off to me at Shawn@yourmaclifeshow.com. We're going to do a photo critique on next week's show. One of our listeners has sent us some more photos for a photo critique. If you'd like to have your photos critiqued, I'm happy to do it in a very kind, sweet, gentle, loving manner. Send me an email with the photos at the highest resolution you can possibly manage, and I'll pick some photos out from your list, and on the show we'll do a little critique. I'll tell you what works, what doesn't work, and I'll try to help you out in fixing any issues that you might have. So send those off to me at Shawn@yourmaclifeshow.com. I think he's still in the chat room. Is he? Yes, Jimmy Newton. Jimmy, I got your email. I'm not going to read it, but I really, really appreciate you sending it. I really, really hope that it's going to work out for you. I hope it works out the way you want it to. That's great that you made the appointment, and really, really hoping that I'm glad to hear that I helped in some small way, but you helping yourself is even more important. So good to hear. Our friend Michael Marino down in Cary, North Carolina, talking about year-round schooling. We talked about this a couple times in the show. He says, it was one of those times I wish I could have been listening to the show live because everything that the emailer said about year-round schooling was wrong, wrong, wrong. I live in Wake County, North Carolina. We're one of the very few school districts in the U.S. that have instituted year-round schooling for grades K to 8. It's been in place for 20 years. Both of my kids, grades 1 and 5, are in year-round schools. The biggest misconception when people hear about year-round schooling is that those kids go to school more than the teachers teach 12 months out of the year. Wrong, Michael says. Both the traditional calendar kids and the year-round kids get 185 days of schooling per year. The breaks in the year-round kids are simply spread out. They will go to school for 4 to 8 weeks, then be off for 2 to 4 weeks. There are 4 tracks in each school, and only 3 are in the school at one time. This allows for more kids to be placed in the school without increasing class sizes. That's very interesting, Michael. What an interesting way of doing it. It works out great for us. We went to Disney this year in the middle of May because our kids were off. There were no crowds. We got cheaper rates because it was out of season. There are still camps for kids. There are countless programs throughout the schools. The local businesses offer camps. Especially in a growing place like ours, they can't build new schools fast enough. Year-round schools enable the current facilities to be better utilized instead of just sitting dormant for 3 months out of the year. Michael Marino, Cary, North Carolina. Thank you, Michael. That was really interesting. I hadn't even thought about doing it that way. I still don't like the idea of the kids still doing 185 days of school a year. I think they should do more, but it's an interesting way of, as you said, utilizing the facilities year-round and having the kids have 4 to 8 weeks on and 2 to 4 weeks off. That sort of staggering idea, I think, is a really good one. Scott Thrift says, I missed something. Australia has year-round schooling of a sort. There are holidays and a long break in January, but that's it. There are 4 semesters and usually a week to 2 week break between, usually one slightly longer break in the summer. Yeah, Scott, here in North America in general, we start school in September, late August for some folks, but September, go to Christmas break, and then you've got a week or 2 weeks in Christmas. Then you go to June, end of June, you get July and August off, so you get 2 full months off here in North America, and you're back to school in September. That's the way it was for me for my entire school year. And I've always said there's no need for kids to have a 8-week vacation. They're kids. What are they getting a vacation from? So, thanks very much for the email. This is great that you guys have been sending me emails on this on a regular basis. I got another one from Scott Randall, too, I'll talk about on next week's show. So thanks very much for the emails, especially for you guys who are parents, who are in the school system, who are using it, utilizing it. Getting your thoughts and opinions are really interesting to me. So I appreciate you guys sending those. I'm not completely 100% healed, so as you can see, I've been hiding cough from you guys. So I'm going to go and rest my voice and cough someplace else rather than a microphone. I want to say thanks very much, as always, to our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com for joining me here on the show. As always, thanks to you guys for being tuned in live to the show. My apologies for not being here the last couple of weeks, but hopefully you enjoyed this week's show, and we'll come back for next week's show. As always, I've been Shawn King, and you're listening to Your Mac Life. See ya!